So I didn't get to do the This Day in History for Transformers Robots in Disguise due to 2 actors from the show that passed away, so we kind of pushed it aside. But luckily, as a result, by pushing it aside, we get Jaws D with us today.
Hey.
So this is awesome. So, and Jaws D is also someone that's a big fan of Robots in Disguise. But then again, a lot of people are, especially if you lived it during that time. Now, for people who don't know, in This Day in History, yesterday, September 8th, 2001, 18 years ago, was the... Yeah, I know. Jeez. I know. Was the American debut of Robots in Disguise in America. Now, keep in mind, Car Robots, which it was based from, actually debuted April 5th, 2000 in Japan. But this was a big deal for the American viewing audience because this was the return to Transformers to vehicle-based toys. Now, granted, Beast Machines prior to that did have vehicle-based stuff, but this was really a return and a true return to form in a lot of ways, where it was licensed vehicles. The Autobots were the good guys that were, rocking the vehicles, while the bad guys this time around, at least initially, were the ones who were the Beast characters. So kind of a flip from what Beast Machines was. But again, just spiritually too, return to cell-based animation, having Optimus Prime, that trademark being used again after all those years of being Optimus Primal, with the exception of Machine Wars in the middle there, which no one really remembers. It was just a big old return for the brand, and in a lot of ways, what Transformers was going to be for the next almost 10 years when I really think about it, just by how it was just going to be a focus on bringing Japanese content over, porting the toys over, and dubbing the process. And, for some people, it was a good thing. For some people, it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
As someone who was watching the Japanese version of Robots in Disguise, Car Robots, as it was airing, I was very excited for this because, number one, I already knew how good the toys were from buying the Japanese ones, and then just enjoying the show for what it was and just hoping at least the dub will be, and I use the term serviceable, as long as it was at least serviceable. Now, again, this was a big turning point for Hasbro and Transformers, and in a lot of ways I feel we really haven't gone back since, in that Robots in Disguise really was, we got to make sure we use all those IPs every single year and keep using those IPs. Now, granted, Robots in Disguise had a whole bunch of names that they used that they practically never revisited ever again.
Yeah.
In that of X-Brawn and Sideburn, those characters would get a toy here and there years later through the club or something like that. But they're really trademarks that you don't really see that much. Even with, you have Prowl. Okay, so Prowl gets used.
Yeah,
and
he gets
Mirage.
lucky.
Mirage from the Spy Changers gets used, and Ironhide. And, we
Ultra
got our
Magnus.
Ultra Magnus. We got our first Hot Shot, came from one of the Spy Changers. But in general, a lot of those names, we got Movor and, a lot of really weird ones here and there.
I think one that
Mega Octane.
I think one that kind of survived was Skybite, but I don't know if he's called that in Cyberverse. I know this is a toy, but
it's still Skybite.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, so yeah.
That's another thing too, is that we were also introduced to some characters and concepts that also became a mainstay in Transformers, like you just mentioned before. Skybite, that oddly enough, when he was Gelshark in the Japanese version, he was what he was, but he really found an audience when the dub version was brought over, because for some weird reason, I don't know who was I think it's here, Tom Wayner, who was in charge of the adapting and scripting. I guess someone decided, you know what, we want Skybite, instead of him being just your generic, second in command Decepticon Deathstronger villain, we want him to kind of be this interesting, poetic kind of character. And Peter Spellows, who was his voice actor that was in charge of him, did an amazing performance, and that made him kind of a breakaway character that people really liked, and as a result, would kind of get remembered throughout the years, and
get
even
revisited in the
revisited
fiction too.
revisited in the fiction. Bakan, made another toy of Skybite just to like go, hey, you know, this character's cool.
That's a very cool toy. I really, really enjoy it.
Oh yeah, that original mold, which was based off of the Transmetal 2 Cybershark.
Yeah.
That's like the Cybershark one is good. The Skybite one is amazing because they just like put like $10 more of paint on it somehow, you know, which just made it so much better. All the little details that are on the shark mode for some reason on the Skybite version just had so much paint on it.
Yeah,
and
so
I don't know
nice.
I don't know. Maybe the budget was better back then, but the point is
well,
that
I think it's just because they're reissuing a toy and they don't really have to do much except just add extra paint. Like they already got the mold there and they're just getting their money's worth basically.
Very strong possibility. But also we were introduced to characters like Scourge, aka Black Convoy from the Japanese version, and while there was evil repaints in the past in Transformers history, this really was the first time that I guess a template was made for how every single Black Optimus Prime repaint would done after that point, because like the first time there really was an evil convoy in a sense was they did a Black Lio convoy, and it was like, oh, okay, like, you know, it has a little bit of teal on it, but, you know, and it's black, but really wasn't the template. It wasn't until Scourge came around, aka Black Convoy, that's like, okay, you're gonna have like the clear pinkish red in the chest for the windows.
Yeah,
you know, that's gonna be like,
and it's gonna match the sword, the Energon sword, and then your eyes, and like,
yeah, it's
just the teal outlines and everything, like just carrying that motif on.
It's kind of like how if you actually take the colors of Starscream and you take the colors of Thundercracker, Generation 1 we're talking here, they actually both have the exact same colors. It's just how they're assembled on the character is different. The blues and the reds are different on Starscream, and the grays are different on Thundercracker, and it makes two different characters. So Scourge is one of these characters where it's like, hey, there's been characters that have been black repaints that have teal and red, but the way that it was assembled on that character and how it would be applied to practically every single evil Optimus Prime repaint moving forward stemmed from Scourge, aka Black Convoy. Also, I mean,
I think that was like, definitely a good reuse of that name. Like, you know, usually we think of the Armada, what's his name? Scourge and his Armada, right?
Yeah, you're thinking like the original Generation 1 character.
Generation 1, but I thought that was a pretty interesting way to go where, oh, no, Scourge isn't some flying guy. He is like evil Optimus Prime.
Well, it's something that at the tail end of Beast Wars, Hasbro started to realize, you know what, I think we got to start looking at some of our IPs. And they pulled up Scourge originally, and they used him on a Locust, which was a Transmetal 2, which is actually a very good use of the name because Locusts, you know, like they're Scourges and all. And so, and again, a good use here because it's like, you know, it's like this guy is like an evil Optimus Prime. He's a Scourge, you know, so it was a very good use of it. The funny thing is with the exception of Megatron, aka Gigatron himself, a majority of the cast consisted of pre-existing toys, at least on the Decepticon or Destron side of things.
Yeah, just mostly Beast Wars toys, if anything, or Beast Wars Neo.
Beast Wars toys, or in the case of Scourge, he's a Generation 2 toy. Yep. In the case of Ruination...
that was Laser Rod Optimus Prime or Laser...
Yep, yeah, Laser Rod Optimus Prime. And then in the case of Ruination, a.k.a. Valdigus, that was just a G1 Bruticus and the crew. And... I mean, later on, the Hasbro side of things, we'd get a whole bunch of other repainted toys that were brought over and stuff, more G2 stuff. Some unreleased Beast Machine toys were released. It was a very good toy line. And again, it was received extremely well by Hasbro. And it really was, again, a big turning point for Transformers because it really showed Hasbro this is what the fans have been clamoring. And it's not to say that Beast Wars wasn't successful. It's that Beast Wars was successful, but it was always one of these things that's like, yeah, we love it. It's great and everything. But when are we getting back to Generation 1? You know, when are we getting back to vehicles? When are we getting back to that? And Beast Machines, as I always said, Beast Machines was something where it's like, as a standalone series, it's very good, but it's one of those series that kind of fell flat on their original intent. It still found success, but it wasn't as big as they'd hoped it to be. And when it was going into its exit, Beast Machines,
Yeah.
toy sales were not as good as they had hoped. The Supreme Cheetor, which was supposed to be one of their big figures, and at the time one of the biggest Transformer toys of all time, didn't do very well. It ended up going on clearance at a lot of places, including back in the early infant days of Amazon back in 2002. Cheetors were going as low as $10. So, which is a massive toy today, but it's like, back then, geez. So it's something that, they did that shift, and it was an easy shift. They even said, like, they were working on Armada, and they're like, you know what, this is good because we could just bring over car robots in disguise, bring over the toys, and it'll buy us time. It was part of Fox Kids' lineup. There was a lot of hype, and it did extremely well. It did extremely, extremely well for them. The toy sales were doing extremely well. What I loved about the later end of the toys, too, especially was, because Hasbro was really just, hey, we could just do repaints and have fun. There was a lot of really interesting toys that, were firsts in a lot of ways for character names, like the character name of Straxus, which was always associated in Generation 2, never had a toy up to that point. And then they just did a repaint of Jetstorm from Beast Machines, made him orange, and threw that into the car robots / robots in disguise toy line. The funniest one was they took that Jetstorm mold, the deluxe, they gave it Jetfire, G1 Jetfire colors.
Yeah.
And they called it Stormjet. And it wasn't the first example of it, but it was one of the earliest examples of modern day Transformer toys homaging old characters. I'm pretty sure there's probably a few that came before it. I know like Primal Prime is one of the best examples that comes to mind, who was like a Optimal Optimus but done in G1 Optimus Prime colors. But I mean, like when that Jetstorm came out, I remember people were scalping it for like $100 on eBay, and people were paying it. It was nuts because at the time that we didn't have classics, we didn't have true. Like and even like something like, I want to say like we really started to get those classic kind of modern toys around the time of Energon, because Energon was happening, but so was Alternators. So we had those two happening side by side. So, during the like, that we're talking, that's like 2004, 2005. So during 2001, 2002, there really wasn't a lot of that. So when that Jetfire, that Jetstorm or Stormjet, when that came out, people went nuts, even though it's a terrible representation of Jetfire and his Valkyrie look. I mean, it's just a straight up repaint of the Jetstorm mold. But to people, it was like, oh my God, like it's a modern interpretation of a classic character using modern engineering. And people ate it up, and there was so much of that. We had the laser cycles, and they were repainted too into the very first Sideways that we ever got, and Axer. Trying to think of a few others. I'm just turning my head here. I mean, there was a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, the JRX team, which again, all of those trademark.
Good. I was like, I want to bring up the JRX team, and then boom,
well,
here we are.
You take it. Say what you love about them.
So yeah, with the JRX team, I think this was like one of the one of the first times we got back to a modern interpretation of a combiner team. But not to also not count the build team. What were they called again?
The build team.
The build team. Well, not to discount the build team that are also in car robots and robots in disguise as well. But they were just really cool. I liked how they used different types of Japanese trains to really make this character look different and set it apart. It's like a 3-character kind of combining thing. I don't know if we ever had that. Aside from Road Caesar's like the big name guy that I know of, but I'm trying to think of anybody else up to that point.
When you're talking like combiner history, the funny thing is that like when you like let's start with JRX, aka Rail Racer, and then you go backwards. It's like you don't really hit a combiner until you get to Beast Wars with Magnaboss and Tripredacus,
right.
which are tri-combiners.
Right, there we go. Okay.
But the thing is that even when you're talking about, like, let's say the build team, you look at the build team, and yeah, they're based off of construction vehicles, but one is like hot green, one is red.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a very Sentai Power Ranger kind of color scheme going on there. But at the same time, not much of an emphasis on realism. While on, you look at JRX, and JRX, I mean, if you just had those alt modes left how they were, you would have thought they're just 3 really good representation of bullet trains from Japanese culture.
Exactly. I think
very well. And just to say to people too, if you're going to buy those toys, and this is from personal experience, get the American versions of them. And I'll tell you why. Rapid Run, which is, I think it's J4, his Japanese version, for some weird reason, they used clear plastic on his joints. And when you combine him, he is very susceptible to breaking.
Yeah.
So, like, a friend of mine, and we're not talking like, gold plastic, 20 years later it going brittle. He bought JRX brand new in 2000. I think it was 2000. Yeah, it was like late 2000. And right away it busted. Yeah. And he was just like, oh, man. And then I was like, oh, like, that's not good. And then when they did the Rapid Run repaint / re-release in Robots in Disguise, they made it all OPEC strong, solid white plastic.
Yeah.
So it doesn't break. So if you're going to get that character, be sure to get the American version.
And I'm surprised they haven't re-released that particular
I am
set.
shocked. I think the only explanation I could think of, and I've discussed this with Aaron Archer in the past, just because it's an alt mode that's not relatable to Americans. I think that is the, like, and that's what happened. Like, a lot of times when Car Robots was a very Japanese, like, when that series was created, it was intent, this is going to be only in Japan.
Yeah.
If it shows up in America, hey, all the better. But it was really made for Japan. And I think that it's one of those things that if that show was kind of made like Armada or any of the series afterwards, where there's more of a collaboration going on, I guarantee one of those guys would have been a steam train. Because one of those guys would have been like Annie and Clarabelle from Thomas the Tank Engine. One of those train cars.
Because it's definitely like the JRX team are that Optimus Prime in his alt mode, which is like a really fancy looking fire truck, and then definitely what's his name, Ultra Magnus, which is like the really crazy looking
car carrier.
Yeah, car carrier, but like really flashy Japanese kind of style.
Oh yeah, totally.
So,
but and that's just it. So it's really a product of that country and a lot of the stuff, and it's stuff that was almost kind of lost in translation too. And one thing that I want to mention about it was, when we mentioned the date at the beginning, Robots in Disguise debuted September 8th, 2001, and then the following week was September 10th, 2001, and then the following week the day after that was September 11th. The attack on the World Trade Centers, and that had a huge effect on Car Robots' airing, because for anyone that remembers the very first episode of Car Robots or Robots in Disguise, Megatron makes his grand debut to Earth by going through a building in his hand mode. And then there's another episode later on in the series where the Decepticons have to hold up a building from falling over.
Yeah.
And both of those scenes got recut and re-edited after episode 3 aired and the 9/11 attack happened. A lot of stuff got edited, and it had to be, there was a lot of reconsidering about war and action shows. And so Robots in Disguise got a little bit affected by that, but not too much. But it was something that was on the table because of just bad coincidence stuff that happens in the show in relation to buildings falling over and destruction to buildings, and just Fox Kids wanting to be sensitive to what was going on in the real world at the time. I mean, there's the old saying, you never forget where you were when X happened, and that's one example of that. So Car Robots happened right smack dab in the Robots in Disguise fell right smack dab in the middle of all of that, and even that was something that was a bit of a casualty in a sense to it. But the series did survive, and it did very well, and it just keeps marching forward. And it's something that to this day still gets homages. Those characters are still remembered.
There was an encore for no, it's not God Optimus Prime. I don't want to say that.
Well,
Convoy.
Godfire Convoy,
Yeah.
Optimus Prime, God Magnus, Fire Convoy. They did reissues recently to make it slightly more show accurate. Came with the sword and everything. So I mean, there is a demand for that stuff over there. The fact that they do reissues of that, and we still to this day, once in a while, the Japanese will or even America will go like, hey, why don't we throw a bone to this character, that character? I mean,
we also have that third-party Optimus Prime from
yes.
Car Robots coming out soon, so
yeah,
that was pretty cool. So I mean, it's not to say that people forgot at all.
Oh no,
people
totally not.
Definitely come back to these characters, and I think one thing I really liked about the show, and more specifically the toys, was the playability between Ultra Magnus and the Autobot brothers. So Brawn, Brawn,
X-Brawn, Prowl, and
Sideburn, and he kind of shows up, and for some reason they all get into his trailer, and he just kind of kidnaps them for a little bit. I remember watching it, and I'm like just not really understanding. Like, oh, we're not getting out, help! And then he finally goes into his Ultra Magnus finally goes into his robot mode, and then he kind of like yells at Optimus Prime, like, you shouldn't have been the leader, that kind of motif happening.
And he powers them up too. He gives them their super modes.
Yeah,
also.
that's true. So it's pretty interesting.
No, it kind of, the funny thing is when you compare the writing for the show, like I said, it really changed the direction for how the writing will be done for Transformers series, because there's a lot of comparisons between Transformers Victory and Robots in Disguise, Car Robots, in terms of the structure of how it is, in terms of the cast, where you have, if you look at Transformers Victory, you have the main leader and then you have his three car-based sidekicks, if you will, which was the Brain Masters, which made Road Caesar. In this case, it's the Car Brothers. Then you had the extra specialty team. So in the case of it was Landcross and his crew. In their case, it's the Spy Changers. And then there's even more extra teams on the side on top of that. And then on the just like in Victory, it was the main villain, and then he had his animal crew that wasn't very smart, and that was Gasgunk and Slapper and Darkscream. And it's the same thing with Victory. It had the Dino King team. And then they got the elite team that came later, which was Ruination. And in the case of Victory, it was Lyozak and Lyo Kaiser and stuff. So there's a lot of similarities. And then the writing style moving forward, we use the term today, the magic mushroom, which is like some, and that we stole that idea from, it started really with Master Force. It got perfected in Victory, and then it was used consistently during all of the Brave series, which was always halfway through the series, you got to introduce something that's going to combine with the leader. And, God Magnus, aka Ultra Magnus, was that for this series, where he shows up halfway. Now there's something for Optimus to power up. The villain character will also get a power up, and then there's the final battle. And this formula would be used for Armada. It would be used for Energon. It would be used for Cybertron.
Wasn't it true for the toys? I think there was an extra mode that Megatron could do, but in the Japanese version he couldn't do it. And then when they released his updated form, Gigatron, and then when they ported that over to America, they just repainted the Gigatron upgrade.
So what you're referring to is the original Gigatron toy, which came out in 2000 in Japan.
The original black one.
Yeah, the black, which is the first version. Gigatron, what we know today as Megatron in Robots in Disguise. The Japanese version could only turn into 6 different things. When he became, which is already a lot to begin with. When he became Super Gigatron or Devil Gigatron, which we know as Galvatron, that mold was retooled in Japan and then was given an extra tab here and there, which gives it the ability to actually turn into, I think it was 10 different things. And actually, according to according to one of the designers, apparently he could do even more than that. But everything, honestly, most of those 10 molds are just you're just using your imagination, really.
Yeah, like the elephant, the hand.
Oh yeah, well, elephant, winged griffin, hand, hydroplane, car, jet,
Oh yeah, it's true, the
dragon.
car.
Like there's so many different designs that it could do. So when they brought over, for some weird reason, I don't even know how this happened, when they brought over the toys to America, they made the mold, which made the regular Megatron, the Devil Gigatron mold, but kept the original colors. So right out of the box, anyone who had a American version of Megatron could do all 10 modes, no problem. So that was like a nice little coincidence, if anything.
Yeah, and I think that was probably done just to be like, well, why import the?
I think it was just I think it was just easier.
Like,
for
why
molds.
bring in the older one and then we're gonna use the newer one when we could already get the mold for the newer one and just redo the colors later? Like, it just seems like a cheaper thing to do.
Well, especially also considering that this series really was going to be a filler, so they just probably wanted to plan everything out right away. Mm-hmm. So it'd just be easier. Hey, we got all the molds here. Let's do this run and then the second run, and that'll be that. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that could be said about this series, but I always like to save a little meat on the bone for whenever the next anniversary will come, maybe the 20th in a year and or so from now. But yeah, I mean, I
don't want to like talk about when I came back from New York. I already talked about this on the show.
I think you've talked about it on the show, yeah.
A lot. So yeah. I don't want to even like beat the dead horse with this thing again. So
long story short, Wendell got a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah. That was an awesome trip to New York.
Yeah,
that was a good Labor Day weekend. And a shout out to my cousin that used to work at Toys R Us. That like, yeah, we could totally go. He wasn't like, why are you still playing with toys? He was like, no, we'll go check and see what's up. And I was like,
damn right.
They're all here. Remember when
Who's laughing now?
Remember Homer had that thing where he was carrying way too much stuff. He's like, come on. Oh, his neighbors were throwing out a bunch of junk, and then he was trying to grab all the junk, but he couldn't carry everything all at once. So that was the moment I had. I was like, how am I supposed to? Okay, I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna get this. Oh, I can't take Megatron. I'm gonna get these guys.
I wish that stuff was readily available at the time here.
That was an awesome haul. I was like, hey, check my haul, Proto Man. He's like, yo, how'd you get this?
They were great toys. They still are great toys. Yeah. I think that the only flaw, just to close this off, the only flaw I find is because they used rubber tires.
Yeah.
For people that, depending on how they stored them and displayed them, they could crack over time. So I always say keep them in a dry area, but keep it out of the sun. Keep it out of somewhere that's really hot.
Anybody looking to make money, make some replacement tires if you can.
Yeah, reissue tires. I know they do in the diecast community that exists, so I'm pretty sure someone could think of that. But anyways, let us know what you think about Transformers Robots in Disguise, your memories of it, who your favorite character was, and where were you when that show debuted?